So I'm here speaking with Christiana Benton of the Still Small Voice, Pennsylvania singer-songwriter. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I feel good today. I slept. That's all I really need to thrive. Yeah. Yeah. How are you doing?
A little groggy. I didn't sleep the night before, so I took something last night, and I keep forgetting what I have to take when that happens. It leaves me messed up. So
a little ambient fog.
Something else. I don't know what it is, but it's just something that I just should just throw away. Quite frankly, It doesn't work. Let me get some fixed here. Okay. So, well, let me first ask, being a musician in these times, you've obviously had to reconfigure your life, and how has the last 6 months been for you?
It's funny because I feel like I'm supposed to be like mad about it.
Yeah.
I am, like, it's a tragedy, like on a global level, it's obviously awful. For me personally, I have had to reconfigure some things, but I think that I was in a place where I kind of needed the downtime to like refocus and kind of recalibrate. So the timing worked out for me, like musically, because I'm working on a record, so that gives me more time to kind of figure out what I'm doing. And it's interesting, as a side note, that like a lot of musicians will say, if only I didn't have to have a job, if only I didn't have to do XYZ, I would just do music all the time. And it's like, I have had so much downtime and the procrastination is real, but I've worked through a lot of it. And so it's been good to just kind of be able to, I have like a little bit of a rig here, and to be able to work on music here and learn Logic and have time to do that. I didn't have a bunch of touring plans on the horizon, so I didn't have to deal with like the burden of, like, if I had booked tours and then they all got canceled, I would have been really upset, but I didn't have anything on the books. I'd recently signed to No Hope Records, so we were just kind of like figuring out what was next. But yeah, I mean, it sucked. I kind of got to the point where I was finally starting to make somewhat of a living wage in the music realm. I was working at a recording studio. I was like occasionally doing sessions, singing sessions, and like booking at a venue. And so all of that got shut down. And I was like, well, never get too excited about anything, I guess. But but it's worked out well. So, it sucks. I think the hardest part has just been like dealing with the lack of being able to just be comfortably social. I deal with anxiety in the first place. So, I live in the heart of Philadelphia, and every time you go out, it's like you have to mask up, you have to be really careful, and that kind of just like is always looming, which can be wearing, but yeah.
Understandable. No, I have similar issues myself, so and it's been up and down this whole year, so
I'm sure. Yeah, it's like one thing after another. So I just hope at the end of everything it just makes people better people, but who knows?
God, I don't even, the idea of society talking about that right now would really be a topic.
It's your podcast. You can talk.
No. I mean, it's not that I don't mind. It's just that I feel like it's just something. It's a topic that I feel like I'm going to just take over. So I don't.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, we'll save it for the next time.
You're obviously able to still maintain a certain amount, even though you weren't touring in some of these typical recording sessions that you would do, you're still managing to be okay during this time, I guess, financially.
Thanks to federal unemployment. I'm fine. Actually, I have more money than I had before, so it's ridiculous. But that's the luxury of not having children and just like taking care of yourself, which is the situation I'm in. It's me and my cat, so like we're chilling. But it's not that easy for other people or for business owners or anything like that.
Yeah, no, I don't like, and yeah, I mean, I certainly don't think it wasn't, I don't know, trying to imply that you should feel some sort of guilt or anything.
Oh no, yeah.
It was just, it's a hard situation this year. I know a lot of people in the entertainment industry and in the restaurant business, and it's you know, I'm like social media. I'm constantly seeing debates about places closing, and because I live outside of Chicago, and I used to write about the food business, so I know a lot of food people.
Yeah.
And like a place closed just yesterday that everybody considered like an iconic place, and they're theorizing will probably be raised and turned into condos or something, and
yeah, crazy.
And I didn't even, it was something I didn't even think about. I just figured that, when things come back, it's something else of significant note will take its place. But this is a very uncertain time. How has the recording of your album been going, or working on it?
Man, it's like when I will sit down and really do the work, which I have been, I'm hard on myself, but like I'm learning. So I started learning how to use Logic, like to record in the beginning of the pandemic. And so I'm like, I've obviously been in studios with producers and engineers, and I worked in a recording studio for a little bit. I used to live in Nashville. Like I've been around it for a long time, but I only knew like very little. And the hardest part, not to get all like meta on you right away, but the hardest part really has been just trusting myself and like believing that I have good ideas and know what I'm doing. Once I am able to kind of do that and then just sit down and do it, it's awesome. And the songs that I have so far are coming out in ways that I'm just really happy with. But I have a lot more to do. And so I'm just kind of like, I told my manager the other day, I was like, we've got to like strap down and make some deadlines and like, crank it out, which is tough because I would just like love to lay in a field of grass all day long and just like think thoughts and sing songs and not like,
right.
There's something really scary about solidifying a song and being like, this is the finished product, here it is, and then now you can judge it, but I'm really happy with it so far. And because it's something that I'm like kind of producing myself with the help of friends remotely in Nashville and in Philadelphia. It's just like kind of feels like my baby, even more so than other things have. So it's cool.
Yeah. What do you anticipate the direction going? Do you anticipate finishing it on your own, or do you think you'll take what you've done and eventually bring it to a studio?
We're actually kind of talking about like what'll happen. We're not really sure. I think it would be cool to do a lot of what I can do by myself and then take it into a studio just for a few days, even just embellish stuff with friends. Cause I like that feeling. I like the camaraderie of it. And there is stuff that you can't do just like in a studio apartment, but it really kind of just depends on how everything susses out, because I'm not going to ask anybody to do anything they're not comfortable with. I don't want to, a lot of studios are still just now starting to open back up, so we'll see what happens. Yeah, I'm kind of playing that by ear.
Studios in Philadelphia, you're saying, are starting to open up, or would you do it in New York?
Oh no, I would do it in Philly. There's actually a really cool studio over in Jersey that I like a lot. And then, but like a lot of people just have rigs in their homes, and we kind of do it that way. So
yeah. Well, nowadays, I mean, being able to record has changed so dramatically. And that actually put something together that sounds as good as anything done in the slickest recording studio that has ever been made. Somehow it's bizarre.
Well, it's crazy because the thing about a recording studio is like it's really about the who the producer and the engineer are. Like that,
Yeah.
I feel like that is what makes, and like having good session players. So if you can get that outside of having to be in the actual building that costs money per hour and usually
Right.
a good solid amount of it, it's like I've just learned over 10 years as a small indie artist, like you just have to like find as much free stuff as you possibly can so that when you do
Yeah.
have to shell out the money, it's on the like vital things. So I'm so like lucky that I know so many incredible musicians who are just friends, and I'll be like, hey, I have this song, and half the time they're like, yeah, don't even worry about it, I can do that in an hour. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I try to make sure that I can pay people for their work, because I think that's the most valuable thing, as opposed to just like bleeding it out in a studio just to say like, oh, we recorded at such and such place. Like,
Yeah.
it can be cool. I do love studios though. I love the vibe of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a chance to visit a famous studio here in Chicago where my godfather used to run certain venues and stuff like that, and we were
Cool.
hanging out at a place, and I was a kid just getting into playing the drums, and it was like something like midnight, and I was hanging out with him and my dad in the studio, just kind of hanging. Lord knows what they were up to, but it's just the vibe of being in the studio is really cool. It's even at a young age, it was like everything I kind of dreamt it would be, like just had that coolness about it.
For sure.
How long have you professionally been making music now?
It's funny when you say professionally, because I feel like I'm still not really that professional, but
well, I would say as soon as you do your first sort of tour or record something and put it out in the world, I would say technically that's when you become a professional, in my worldview at least.
For sure. Yeah, I would say, I mean, I've definitely been going at it for almost a decade now. I put out, when I first moved to Nashville in 2011, it was kind of shortly after that I put out a record that isn't on Spotify. It's actually just on Noise Trade right now, because I didn't want to keep paying to have it on Spotify, and also it was kind of rough. Like, I was trying to put the focus on an album that was later. But yeah, I think we put that out in, I don't know why I keep saying we. I mean, there was a bunch of us, like a lot of friends, but it was kind of my thing, and put that out in 2012. And yeah, I've just been doing it since then. Would book DIY tours and play basement shows and, little bars and stuff like that, and just have a handful of friends I've had like a bunch of band changeovers, not out of any kind of like volatility or anger, just literally just because of life circumstances. It's like, this guy can't go on tour because he's got to work at his coffee shop and pay his bills, and she can't come out this time because of XYZ, she's in another band, so
yeah, it's a lot different when you're technically like a solo artist and you're not a band. It's a lot harder.
Yeah, I think I always wanted, and that was actually the hardest part in the beginning, was figuring out like, oh, I'm a solo artist, this isn't a band. Because in my head, I was like, I just want to be Paramore. And it's like, practically, like, it's not, I didn't start a band at 18 in a garage. So there wasn't that, there wasn't that sense of like a brotherhood or something like that.
Right.
It's like, I'm writing these songs, I'm making these melodies, and there are people who want to come alongside me, but having to learn that meant that I had to give actual direction, was tough.
Yeah.
Oh, I have to be in charge of this. Like,
right. Yeah, it's a lot different when you're the boss and not like participating in decisions.
Yeah, like, well, just not expecting everybody in the band to like hold the same level of like weight, or expect them to do the same amount of stuff as me. But also that meaning like I have to make the big decisions and I don't have to dole them out to everybody else and just guide. But I think for a long time that was really tough, because, I won't get into the whole rigmarole of like being a woman in music, but you do just feel like there's like this diva label or this bossy label that you're going to get. But usually if you're like afraid of being bossy, it's because you're not like a tyrant. You're just considerate of people. So
Yeah.
eventually I figured it out. I'm getting better at being a little bit more assertive. So
Okay. Well, let you know that pose in your response, you posed two interesting ideas in my head. One is that since you are technically a solo artist, you rely on your manager more than maybe some people would, as sort of a band member in themselves.
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. My manager is just my friend Jim, but he's great. And he and I met at an open mic at a bar by my house, and we just hit it off really quick. And he like joked about how he felt like we were friends in a past life kind of thing. It was just kind of an immediate like rapport.
Mm-hmm.
And he's so funny because I say this to him all the time, but he's not the kind of person who would like brag on his credentials in the music industry, you know? And I just had this feeling like, hey, I should ask you to manage me. Like, I would never really even do that. But I was like, I would, I'd love it if you were my manager. And he was like, okay, cool. Let's talk about it. And we did. And then like within 2 weeks, he like had a friend who was like had their own record label and introduced me, and he was like, check stuff out. And we like literally within a month of me being like, Jim, do you want to be my manager? I was signed to a labal.
Yeah, that's
Which was
great.
crazy. Yeah, it was awesome. And they're like the best label. I just love them. They're like, it's like a little family. But then like as I got to know Jim better, I was like, dude, you have like so many cool like he's worked for record labels, like he worked for Kickstarter, he helps artists fund their Kickstarter projects now. Like he has this company called Craft Services where he helps people do that. So it was just funny. I like just got intuition, and then I was like, oh yeah, you know what you're doing. He manages another band called Punchline. They're like pop punk. So that was a cool feeling. And yeah, he has definitely helped me out a lot, even just for morale, just like a pep talk now and then. So
That's great. I mean, it's hard finding the right people. I believe I heard Stephen Van Zandt say that finding a manager is probably the biggest key to being a musician that wants to, go somewhere, not just wants to, sit around and play in their backyard or whatever. A manager the right manager can either do you in or, do you proud, basically.
yeah.
And it's good to hear that this sounds like this worked out well.
Yeah, for sure. I'm really wary of anybody who's like a steamroller of a person, just
Yeah.
like wants to tell you how to do things and what to do and when. And I do like the direction, but it's definitely helpful to have somebody just like right off the bat know that like they're just going to be like, what do you think? Here's what I think, but like ultimately you're going to make the final call. And sometimes I'm like, no, you do it. Like I want to choose, but I have to learn how. So, yeah. So, and it's great because like Sean, who runs No Hope Records, and Jim are like good friends. So when we hang out, it's just like pals. But then at some point we talk business a little bit.
Right. Yeah. The business hat gets put on by everybody.
Yeah, it's a good vibe.
So it was, there weren't just two, there were three things that you mentioned about being a woman in the business. And I wanted to find out what you have experienced so far as the pluses and minuses so far.
Yeah, the juicy details.
Well, you obviously you can leave names out if it's, something you don't want to get, but I'm not normally somebody that's into salacious stuff, but I am interested in your experience as a performer in this world.
Yeah, man, I feel like I haven't had any more or less like, I'll start with the maybe negative experiences. I don't feel like I've necessarily had more or less negative experiences than anybody else. It's kind of a mixed bag. I would say a lot of it was when I was younger. I felt like the overarching like theme. I grew up in New Jersey. I grew up around like the hardcore scene in New Jersey, and like
Mm,
I don't even know if you could call it that. I was like emo, and I had seen hair, and you know the whole thing, like too much eye makeup, the vibe.
yeah.
And I grew up around that, but it felt like a boys' club, and I felt like I was tempted all the time, and probably caved into the idea of like having to be one of the boys in order to be respected and valid. And I also wanted to make music, and I primarily play acoustic guitar. Sometimes I'll play electric, but it felt like, is there space for this to be taken seriously? Or the other option was like to be the girlfriend in the back, like waiting for her boyfriend to get off stage and like having to kind of sit there quietly and look pretty. And like maybe that was just my black and white perspective at the time, but that's kind of how it felt. So it felt like as a woman you had to like do a lot more to be taken seriously, and you very much had to sacrifice your femininity or your sexuality as a female to be respected. But then to be like dateable, you had to like go the far other side, and that's kind of how it felt. And I definitely have had experiences with people saying things like, you know, I remember this one guy made me so mad. He like, I was doing a fundraiser at the time for an album. I was just trying to get, I think, a couple $1,000s to be able to print discs. I guess, yes, I was printing some discs. And he kind of said something to me randomly of like, if you weren't a pretty girl, do you think people would be as like apt to give you money for this fundraiser? And I was just like, what? Are you
Yeah.
serious? Like, I'm working so hard. Like, what are you talking
Right.
about? And I posted a screenshot of it on Instagram. This is like years and years ago. And it ended up
Yeah.
working in my favor because people were like so mad on my behalf that they like helped me get the funding for these
Yeah.
CDs. But you definitely come up against some of that where it's just like, you know, you get on stage and you play something and you get off and people are like surprised you could use your hands. Like,
Right.
um, but
Do you find that happens more with men, or does it happen as well with women? Because I know there's a certain, still in this age, there's a certain element of women out there that also seem to denigrate other women, for, and I'm not sure if that's based on their own worldview, or you know, we could probably analyze that forever.
yeah.
But there is a certain idea that female artists in music are somehow less than. And I've run into that with people in my life. And I grew up, and not to get sidetracked on me, but I grew up, you know, my mom eventually became a single mother of 3 children, but I grew up with like Linda Ronstadt, Fleetwood Mac, Emmylou
Yeah.
Harris, Crystal Gale, like playing in the house, and always loved female artists. And I went to Lilith Fair a couple of times. It says probably how old I am, and I was at Lilith Fair.
I know what Lilith Fair is, yeah.
But you know, you know, the idea of a female artist has always been, to me, as relevant and as worthy as any guy. I mean, that you know, that's for sure. And I've never I guess because everything seemed normal, you know, that seemed normal to me. It always seemed strange. I've always, you know, it's also the perception. I came up at an age where we thought we were dealing with the end of racism, but then, you know, we're in an age now where it's everywhere. It's
Right.
like, you know, maybe it's a certain sort of head in the sky sort of thing on my part, but you know, it is interesting that how easily women in any field, but particularly in music, still are kind of written off. And you know, it's just strange that you would still have to experience something like that. I'm not sure if I had a question there.
Well, I don't feel like I experience it that much now. And for everything, there's a counterbalance, right? So it's like for every guy who's surprised that I can play a riff that I wrote, like there is the benefit of people being like, like excited because they're seeing something new, right? Or something they don't get to see all the time. And I feel like, at least I think that on one hand, it does depend on the genre you're kind of in or the surrounding you have. Cause like, it just depends on what's more dominant. And I think there's a lot going on, especially like in underground music, to combat these like silly notions that, like, if you go to a show, that the lineup should be predominantly like white men, like, but at the same time, I don't want to be tokenized. So it's like finding this balance. So I guess ultimately, to answer your question about like women with other women, I think that just comes down pretty simply to the fact that we have created, or society has created, this illusion that there's only so much space for cool women to make music. And I think that's changing a lot now with like, there's just like a lot of badass like women making music, like Julian Baker and Phoebe Bridgers and like everybody in Boy Genius, or like just like all over the place. I mean, even Taylor Swift, she's like fucking killing it, like who am I to say? Like, maybe I don't like folk pop music, but there are definitely women dominating in a lot of ways, which is really cool. So I haven't experienced a whole lot of like weirdness from women, really just camaraderie. And
well, that's good.
If anything, just like a sort of a sense of awe. Like, it's a privilege to me anytime I can get off stage and somebody a little younger than me is like, oh, like, cool, I could do this too. And I'm like, yeah, exciting.
And that's good to know. I mean, it's just, that there's still this, there's this grander, underlying thing that I don't know what it takes to totally destroy certain modes of thinking. I suppose it's centuries of male dominance that kind of, it's an ingrained thing. It's not necessarily always a on purpose thing, and it's just a gradual thing that we'll have to ease out of society. And I know that there's this division of people that they want it to, absolutely end right now. But the problem is, again, it's like centuries of thinking that, it's, I don't know. There's no easy answers right now, it seems. I think certainly living in the most difficult period in my life. I think my generation thought we were on the right path, and this last 10 years has shown us that we're still far away from what we thought. But you mentioned something else about assertiveness. Is that something that you had a problem dealing with as a, throughout your life? Are you generally more on the meek and mild side and were afraid to raise your voice?
I think I'm an assertive female who was like forced to be meek and mild for a really long time. Not in the sense that I'm not really an abrasive person. Like, I'm very soft and kind, and I care about people, but I definitely am more like administrative leaning and like very just like straightforward in general. I think that's part of the reason why I was kind of more comfortable being in like the boys club, like because it felt like I'm not gonna like generalize the the sexes, but like it feels like you can kind of be a little bit more straightforward in those environments. And but I also grew up, not to like get into this too much, but I grew up really religious, and that's another environment where like outspoken women are like not particularly welcome or invited, so I kind of learned, I always came up against issues with that, but I think it took me a while to realize that like I'm essentially the author of my own life and autonomous, and I'm not like waiting for somebody to give me a stamp of approval, but I also want to treat other humans with kindness and be like considerate and contribute to society in a positive way. Like you're saying, I think in every generation there are good eggs and bad eggs, and it's not that anybody is inherently bad. I don't really believe in that. I think we are all like at our core have the potential for good, but people give into, pain and ego and all this stuff. And like,
Yeah.
I think we'll always just be finding new layers to pull back where we're like, oh, I thought we weren't racist anymore. Turns out we are still, like,
Yeah.
and we'll always have stuff to work on. And I just hope we keep, like, the trajectory keeps getting better.
Well, I would hope so too. It's interesting. Almost every time you have an answer, I have something else that I want to ask you about then. And obviously the name, the Still Small Voice, is based in religion. And you said you grew up in a religious family. How much does that involve in your life today?
So now I guess I would just consider myself like a universalist or an agnostic. I don't really affiliate myself with any particular religion. And that kind of came with the move to Philadelphia. Like I felt like when I was in Nashville, I mean, it's the Bible Belt, and I was immersed in an actually really beautiful, healthy Christian community. Like I went to a church and knew a lot of really wonderful people, but I had never fully resonated with it. And it's not that I didn't even resonate with it. It's that it felt like I wanted to expand past it in my own mind and in like how I saw the world. But I think I was afraid of the unfamiliar. And so when I moved and I made the leap to Philadelphia, it was the first time in my life that I didn't make friends through church. It was the first time I didn't like identify in that way. And it was actually really freeing for me. And I don't have any disdain toward it, but my last record was pretty much predominantly about like the pain of like the cognitive dissonance that I felt in a religious environment that I didn't really fully subscribe to. And like in the way that I grew up, and dealing with obsessive compulsive disorder and anxiety, and how if I felt like those two played into each other in some pretty profound ways. So that's what that album was about. But yeah, in my life now, I still have spiritual like thoughts and feelings, and I meditate and try to like pay attention to the bigger picture in general, but I don't affiliate myself with any like particular religion.
Yeah. How did you grow up with religion? What form?
Charismatic evangelicalism. So
That's a branch.
yeah. So you are familiar with evangelicalism probably because of Donald Trump, unfortunately.
Before that, but yeah.
Yeah. Charismatic evangelicalism is essentially like a more what's the right word? A more emphatic version, like speaking in tongues and believing in miracles. And we didn't handle snakes or anything like that. Falling down at church, like just like the stuff you see in Jesus Camp. That movie,
yeah.
like that stuff. And I won't knock it. Like I mean, those kinds of experiences happen in a lot of religions. They just like branded it, I guess. I don't know, but and I've had weird spiritual experiences, but I think once you try to make it a shtick, it's dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, my viewpoint on religion has changed over the course of my life, but I grew up in the era of TV evangelicals dominating, and the Jim and Tammy Baker, era, and the original Jerry Falwell with his issues.
Oh, I'm familiar. Yeah.
Yeah. So it probably put a warped sense of religion in my head. But as I got older in my life, I found a non-denominational church that I actually ended up participating in, which I don't go now, but I have more spirituality than I used to, I suppose. But it's hard to subscribe to any one religion. I'd say the closest I would be to any religion would probably be Buddhism based on its practices, but even that it's hard to subscribe to any one facet of religion, quite honestly.
Yeah. I feel like when I came out of Christianity, like more officially, which actually was a much more seamless transition than I expected it to be, and has been generally beneficial to me because I'm not being triggered all the time. But like, I definitely am more inclined towards certain Buddhist notions. And that was just sort of inherent, like just the idea of learning that life's better when you don't put expectations on everything, and it's better to just kind of surrender a little bit and slow down and go inward. But yeah, I'm not trying. I know my own proneness to get like to go all in and to get a little intense about stuff. So I'm not trying to like jump into that or become a guru or anything, you know?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
How is your family okay with your change in religion? Obviously they brought you into the faith, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm. So my parents became like born again Christians, is what it was called in the 90s.
Mhm.
It was in the 90s? No,
Oh,
in the mid 80s.
yeah.
Um, and they actually, I mean, we all went through some painful church experiences together as a family, which
Okay.
kind of like woke them up to like having to really like think for themselves a little bit more. And so
Mhm.
I credit my parents greatly for being able to just sort of evolve more than I
Mhm.
see a lot of people their age being able to evolve. My sister is married to a pastor
Mhm.
of a church. My brother's not really affiliated with anything. But when I decided that I officially like wasn't going to be like a labeled Christian anymore, I did have like a heart to heart with my mom that felt very much like what I would assume coming out feels like, where I just was like totally freaked and I didn't want to do it and so afraid of what the response would be. And it was like so much better than I could have expected. And she was just like,
Yeah.
I think you're like, essentially was like, I think you're a really smart person. And no matter what you believe, like you're going to be okay. And God loves you and you're fine. And I was just
Yeah.
like, what? And I think that itself just like took a weight off my chest. And
Yeah.
I was like, I'm really okay. Like, I
Yeah.
think so much of what we affiliate is like, so many of the things that guide our lives are like retroactively connected to really like our parents' approval. So
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
that was freeing. So
Yeah, I can see that. I can definitely see it. I want to circle back on something else you brought up. We talked about your anxiety, but you brought up obsessive compulsive disorder. Is that something you still deal with?
I deal with certain elements of it mentally. I don't have a whole lot of outward
Right.
tics, as I would call it.
Right.
Um, but I have a friend who also has it, and she and I like recently realized that like we recently reconnected and found that out, and so we've been talking about it a lot. And the more I talk to her, the more I'm like, oh yeah, I still have these like inclinations toward it, but I don't see it in such a negative light anymore.
Hmm.
I see it as like maybe a certain level of untapped creative energy. That sounds like like I'm glamorizing it, but I'm not. I'm just
No,
saying.
I get what you're saying.
I think like people with OCD tend to be like really detail oriented, and some of it is definitely trauma based, some of it's genetic, um, and some of it is just so sadly debilitating. But for me, like a lot of times, yeah, like I guess I'm just grateful that I am able to give people like a certain level of reprieve by talking about it. Is
Hmm.
really what it is. But yeah, I have a little bit of it. Like I definitely have the tendency to overanalyze, overprocess, harp on certain things in my mind for the entire day. But I don't have to wash my hands till they bleed anymore.
Right.
So that's helpful.
Yeah.
And actually, oh, go
Sorry. Go
ahead.
ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that there's a song on the last album called Ritual,
Okay.
and there's also a music video for it, and it's about that specifically.
Oh,
Just
that's because I did listen to what you have put out, and that song in particular I did like, so that I'll have to go back and listen to it with a different mindset.
Oh yeah.
next time. Well, what I was going to say is, do you find yourself, because there's one aspect of it that I find myself doing is having I don't know how to put this, having conversations in your head before you have them, so that you make sure that you get everything that you know right before having the conversation.
Yeah, I it's a blessing and a curse because it's not always, I don't always even prep the conversation, but I definitely do. Like before this interview, I was definitely just like thinking through like things I would say, even though I didn't have an idea what you were going to ask me. Like
Right.
I mentally prepare for conversations for sure. And then I feel a sense of like unfinished business if I don't, like, if I think of something and then like you get off topic for a while, like it will just linger in the back of my head like a little
Yeah.
ticking
Yeah.
until I can like get it out, which like with writing is great because you can kind of rabbit trail and then you're like, you bring it back together. It's awesome.
Right.
You like know how to make something seamless or like come full circle. But in everyday life, it's not really like practical. And sometimes you end up talking a lot and not
Yeah.
listening enough.
Yeah, no, I have that issue. I still have issues where I recreate arguments I had with my ex-wife, and where I sit there and I then realize what I should have said, even though we've been divorced 5 years and she just got remarried. It's like, well, there's no point to it now.
Yeah, I think that's why I lean towards that kind of Buddhist thing, because that's the only thing I found that helps me just go like, okay, I don't have control over the past.
Right.
I don't even have control over the future. All I can do is like let it go. And then I'm like, oh, there's so much less noise for the next
Yeah.
3 seconds with my back.
Yeah. Until something else
Yeah, exactly.
runs right into it.
Yeah.
Well, I know we've been talking for 45 minutes, so I want to ask you a couple more questions, and then
Sure.
you were able to do a song or two.
Yeah, I'm good to go.
However, if you want to just do one, that's fine.
I have two, but it just depends on how much time you.
I have plenty of time. I just wanted to make
Okay.
sure that how you're comfortable.
Sure.
Who, when you were growing up, who definitely influenced you as a performer?
Oh God, it's like, it's cheesy, but I would say like all of those mid 2000s emo bands. I would, yeah, I mean, the first person I feel like it's such a dummy because anytime I've done a podcast interview, I somehow mentioned Dashboard Confessional, but I just like loved Dashboard Confessional growing up. Copeland, a lot of these, like a lot of Tooth and Nail bands and Drive Through Records bands. Trying to think off the top of my head, like.
But these names are taking me back because when I was writing about music in the early 2000s. God, I don't know how many emails I used to get from Drive Through Records and promotional copies. It's like it was never really my scene, but some of it I did like. And this is off topic, but at the first new version of Lollapalooza in Chicago in 2005, they had a setup where they had two stages on the same field, and they had bands going at the same time. So at one point, Dashboard Confessional was on. And then, was it Anton from the band? Oh my God, why can't I remember? Brian Jonestown Massacre was on the opposite side, and there was bleed from both sides. So at one point, Anton just starts screaming, "Well, somebody tell Fonzie to shut the fuck up!"
Oh my God, it's so mean, but it's funny. But
Anton's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I loved that. I loved like Owen, which is like Mike Kinsella from American.
Oh yeah, Owen's cool. Yeah, I've got some of their stuff on a playlist. Yeah.
Yeah, Owen's like, I'm a big fan. It sucks because like I feel like I didn't really get a ton of exposure to female artists that I connected with, and that's okay. Right. I mean, I loved David Bazan because he was grappling with a lot of the same stuff I was with, just
religious
like
was. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think I've grown to like just be totally smitten with like the way that female artists have come out of the woodwork I mean, I did love Feist. I really liked her vulnerability a lot. Trying to think who I listened to a lot of Rilo Kiley.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had kind of like that kind of folky indie. I liked a lot of arts and crafts records bands like
Oh
Stars
wow.
and
Yeah, yeah,
Brooklyn
yeah.
Social Scene.
Yeah.
So I had kind of like a mix of like pop punk and then like more just like indie, like fun, like pretty stuff. Just
Yeah.
kind of.
Well, it's weird having this conversation. It's taking me back. It's like now I'm starting to. It's like just right now I'm starting to view the 2000s as, you know, a nostalgic decade because now we're 10 years away from it.
It's scary, right?
Yeah, it is because that was like a period. It's like different, you know, when you're growing up in your early teens and then you're in your early 20s and it's different. It's a different thing then. But then as all that stuff was happening in my 30s. So I was like, okay, you know, down the whole of it I dug, but there was still, I'm like, okay, rock's not dying completely. And then the last decade happened and I'm like, well, I mean, rock is now jazz. I mean, you know, it's got its followers, but it doesn't seem like anybody's going to take it, you know, seriously like they used to. You know, the bands will have successful tours, but there's not going to be anybody. I mean, I think the last band that could headline a festivals from, you know, would be from that era, which was like the Killers or something like that. You know, it's like that was like I don't think there's a band since that's in any of that kind of league. It seems. And
I'm trying to think. I mean, the Foo Fighters are always doing stuff.
Yeah, but they were earlier too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking like from that time. That seems that seems like them, like the Strokes, you know, are kind of like one of those always at the top of the bill for indie festivals and stuff like that when they do make another album. But yeah, it's just weird how music has changed. I mean, it's like it seemed like the emo thing was the last real new scene, you know, for rock and roll back when it came out.
Yeah, I think it's evolved. I think it's kind of, I don't know, this is me talking out of my butt, but like I really do think it's kind of like a hip hop and pop era right now. And that's cool. Or like SoundCloud rappers seem to be doing their thing right now. And that's kind of it's weird because it's like a mix of, it's kind of emo rap, like a lot of what that is. So you see like Machine Gun Kelly and you're like, this is emo. Like I just recently, so that's what I listened to. And I'm sort of like changing what I listen to now because I'm trying to like, I don't know, you get older and you like evolve. But my friend told me to listen to Halsey's Manic record, and I'm listening to it, and I can like hear her pop punk influences, which he then like sent me a screenshot and was like, "You were right," and I was like, "Yeah, I could hear it." And she's from New Jersey too, and a lot of her lyrics are very like emo lyrics, but it's set to a more pop sound. Same with this girl Lennon Stella, who just put a pop record out that is like so good I can't wrap my mind around it, and I never would have thought I'd say that about a pop record because it's not my thing, but I can relate to what you're saying about just being like, oh, that was my 30s. Like I went to Urban Outfitters the other day with a friend and I was like, they're selling like things from my childhood as like cool throwback items now, and I'm like,
yeah, like what?
Like butterfly clips. Like I don't know if you remember that, but like I mean, like just the clothing in general. Bucket hats, like they're cool now. Nobody looks good in them, but that's fine. And I just was like, oh, I feel I can't wear any of this as a 31-year-old woman, but I also feel very old, even though I'm not, like just at the mere fact that they're selling this is like a cool
I found once you get past 30 and I don't even want to talk about 40, I'm fast approaching 50, which is not thrilling me at all, but once you get past 30 things start looking a lot different than when you're in your 20s or earlier. You start realizing, oh my god, there are 18-year-olds running around doing new stuff, and you don't have to
Yeah.
what the hell it is.
I am like, I don't get it at all.
Yeah.
I'm not going to try to attempt TikTok. Like, I don't get these dances. I just feel like everybody is just this all the time.
Yeah.
It's so peculiar to me. But I also am not judging because I know that my parents were just like, what are you doing, when I was putting like hairspray and like making my hair like this big and wanted snake bites, like, you know.
Yeah, I try to do that. I try to be kind to young people, but I do find myself becoming a crotchety old man at times too, and you
earned it. It's okay.
Yeah, but but there are exceptions. Like you mentioned Halsey. She's somebody that really actually did come out and surprise me. And another one I'm interested in, and it's not like I'm new. I'm early to the party. I'm certainly late. But Billie Eilish, is somebody that's pretty cool too. But I do find myself, as I'm getting older, finding rarer and rarer new things to like. I find myself finding new things from the past to get into, like jazz and big band stuff, and things that I didn't really discover before. The last few years I've really gotten into garage rock and like 50s and 60s soul and stuff like that. So I feel like there's always time to learn, but as far as new stuff, I feel like you're probably about the newest artist I've listened to in the last year. So,
Yikes.
yeah, that's, and I mean, considering the releases, yeah, I mean, it is new and modern. So, I guess I'm happy about listening to something new for a change.
I'm glad I could be here for you to expand your horizons.
I'm surprised you said you were 31, because when I saw your photo, when I was listening to music and stuff, because I was going through Mike's, your PR person's client list, and there was a lot of people. In fact, I'm talking to 2 more people that he represents in the next week. Okay. I assumed you were like 22. So
hell yeah, got those good pores. Thanks.
Yeah.
I constantly feel like I'm grasping at a dream that I'm too old for, which I think is bullshit. And I'm hoping that one day I can look back and be like, oh, I helped pave the way for women who weren't 19, like, because I feel like I didn't take as many risks when I was younger, because I was like, oh, it's a guy's club or whatever. And I was like afraid of that. But then, like, as I've like, not that I thought I couldn't take risks and like get out there doing music, but that I was somehow lesser because I was like a female playing acoustic guitar.
Right.
And that I needed to make a rock band to be taken seriously. And like, in retrospect, now that I'm seeing people I'm seeing women get up there with just an acoustic or just an electric guitar and just kill it and have a fan base and a following. I'm like, dang, I like could have. And I am, and I still am, but I hope to at least be able to make women who are not, 22 years old feel like I can still keep doing this. I'm not like expired, because society puts like a timestamp of 35 years old on women. Even in music, it feels like sometimes like, there are definitely like cool older women who are like killing it, but a lot of them started out really young. So yeah, but I do appreciate that. It's just I
hate to get like sidetracked on looks. I'm just saying I just assumed that you were younger than you were. So anyways,
it's sunscreen. Yeah. And
staying out of the sunlight has worked for me. I get told I don't look my age all the time, and so I don't go outside much.
I just stay in the basement and it works out fine.
Yeah, just I go inside my crypt at night and I chill there.
Perfect.
Or my metabolic chamber, like Michael Jackson used to have, or whatever the hell.
Did he really? Is that
some sort of chamber he used to go? I don't
didn't
know.
really work for him.
Michael was a weird dude.
About We don't have to get into that one.
No. Michael
rough.
Jackson's a whole separate thing, and that somebody I prefer not to talk to. I don't know why I brought him.
Yeah.
Have you ever gone back to the '90s to kind of examine like the female generation that kind of came alive in that point? Because if not, I'd recommend going back and really there's the '90s was a killer generation for female artists. I feel there are so many women that I still admire so much from that era.
Yeah, there's a few. I should kind of do like an exploration of it. It's funny because I feel like there are people I love. First of all, I do have like a connection to the '90s that I feel like is somewhat just ingrained, and I like love the Goo Goo Dolls, and I like think the Cranberries are awesome, and that kind of like it feels kind of emo too. Like it was like a precursor in some ways, and then that artist Soccer Mommy, I don't know if you've ever heard of her.
No.
She has this song called Circle the Drain that feels very like reminiscent of that, or like also early 2000s. I was a big Michelle Branch fan.
Okay.
But as far as 90s go, yeah, I could definitely explore that a little bit more probably. I was like, pretty young.
Yeah, you were young. Yeah, no.
But yeah, I kind of am embarrassed about the fact that I don't know like a whole lot of classic stuff.
Well, it takes. I found that too as a music lover. I found that it took me a long time. I'm just still discovering artists from the '90s that I like. I've always been into Britpop, and I finally searched a playlist on Spotify, and like all of a sudden I'm getting into the Manic Street Preachers, who were not so successful here, but they were a huge band in the UK.
Yeah.
And so there's always room to kind of add on to your musical knowledge. But I mean, I think back to that time, like of Liz Phair and Courtney Love and Bjork and Tori Amos and Sarah McLachlan, all these amazing. In the case of somebody like Liz Phair, her first album is probably one of the most frank and acerbic sort of albums about being a female in the music scene in Chicago. I mean, that's a very narrow category, but it's probably the only one. But as far as, just it was a time that was definitely seeing women break out of a certain mold. Even though in the 80s, that even going back to the 70s with the Runaways and Joan Jett and everything that, oh God, I'm just babbling at this point, but no,
I mean, I hear you. It's like, I was kind of sheltered too, so I was listening to a lot of Christian rock at that point. And Backstreet Boys, big fan, and NSYNC. But I mean, it was definitely like an interesting time for music, and I did love Sixpence None the Richer, which was kind of like one of those overlapping bands. Like
right. They were quasi-Christian.
Yeah, like still, I kind of recently threw on one of their records, and I was like, "This is still so good. Like it's so good." Her voice is so insane.
Okay, I've got a band. Since you like Sixpence None the Richer and the Cranberries, I've got a band you have to check out that I'm sure you'll love. Feel free to check out everything else. But if you've never heard of them, the Sundays.
Okay. Like the day Sunday?
Yeah, the Sundays. Yeah.
Okay.
They put out 3 or 4 albums. They're from the UK. They came out in the late 80s through the like the mid 90s. They were around. They're in that area, And I would also say like Mazzy Star and.
Yeah, I thought you were gonna say Mazzy Star.
No, because people know the Sundays were never really huge here.
Okay.
The Innocence Mission's another band in that that ilk. But yeah, the Sundays I think you would definitely appreciate.
Cool. Yeah, I'll have to check that out.
All right. Well, I think I've taken them up to your time to ask you.
I could talk for a million years, but
I could too. I'll
have to go to the bathroom at some point. So
yeah. But if you want to do a song or two, that would be great. If you could just kind of set each one up a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm gonna play you 2 that are going to be on this next record. I'm working on them currently. Make sure this is all.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
So this one is called Take a Hint. I'm going to turn my gain down like a tad just in case I get too loud, and just like give me a signal if I'm too loud. This song is, so I kind of mentioned that the last record was a lot about religion and mental health. This record is a lot about just coming into your own skin and primarily heartbreak. So kind of throwing it back to what I said about, Dashboard and Copeland and these more emo bands. I loved listening to them, but I always felt like I wanted to write about heavier stuff than like romance. And then I got older and realized that like romance is heavier stuff, and loneliness is a real thing that people deal with. So this record's kind of about that. This song is about, the song's called Take a Hint, and it's about when you are into somebody and you can tell that they're not as into you as you are into them, and that you're like kind of grappling with, do I try to convince them to be into me, or do I accept the fact that I deserve better than that, Okay. So I'll go. Is it enough to say that I want love, but in a different way, and not the kind that needs to be convinced? 'Cause I want you, but I want you to want this. Turns gray, I'll look back on all the things I didn't say, like how your kiss was like warm water on my skin, but it ran cold and I know how to take a hint. And every time I get too close, I hear the repeating cool reminders of the times I felt this same feeling. Oh, don't lift me up to let it down. It gets defeated. To a heart attack when I should be leaving. And if my heart is made of glass, rest assured you're gonna see the light refract. The painting colors on the walls, 'cause who you call fragile, someone else just calls. And every time I get too close, I hear the times I felt the same feeling. Oh, don't lift me up to let down. It gets defeated. Thanks. Was I peeking out?
What's that?
Was I peeking out a little bit? Like
What do you mean?
The volume? Was it
No,
getting
no. I'm hardly the guy to ask. You
Okay.
sounded fine to me. And
heard it?
my editor will probably, be able to, if there was anything, he'll probably be able to compress it or adjust it.
Okay, cool.
I leave all that to, he's a guy I grew up with. He knows video and audio, and I couldn't have been happier when he said, because he's had downtime because of COVID. He said he would start doing these things for me. I'm like, oh, thank God,
awesome.
because I don't know anything about this stuff, and he makes the show look a lot better than it has any right to be.
That's always good to have that
yeah, so I mean, I handle the interviewing and the booking and everything, and he handles all the behind the scenes work. So,
nice.
which is awesome, and I'm sure if there's any issues, he'll fix them. But what was that song called again?
That's called Take a Hint.
Take a Hint. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's for the next release.
Yeah. So that should be, I don't know if I mean, I think it's fine to say this, but it'll be like, it's going to be one of the singles that comes out before the record officially comes out. So yeah. And then this one is called Arches, and it is about like that kind of push-pull romance that you can have with somebody where it feels like maybe it's long distance, or maybe it's just like the timing's never been right, but you kind of wonder in the back of your head, like, if it hasn't happened, is that because like we're not really as invested as we're saying we are? And is it kind of just a game? Like that Lennon Stella record I mentioned earlier has this song called Games on it that's just like so killer. And I guess this was kind of my version of that, like the chorus just says like would you want me if you could have me? Like if this was a real, actual, tangible possibility, like would we really be invested, or is this just us like playing some sort of like fantasy thing in our heads, which I think is really common. It's like so much safer to just live in your head than to actually take a risk.
Yeah.
So yeah. This is Arches, and this is what I've been kind of working on like currently. Let's see. And this tuning is just a total American football ripoff. So.
All right, I'll let you go. I'm going to mute myself.
Oh, the way the arches of your face remind me of music, remind me of songs I listened to in teenage summers, and I can't relax. Here's the thing, you've been catching me off guard in autumn weather, in faces that resemble yours. I'm going about my business, trying to get rid of this. Not trying too hard. But would you want me if you could have me? Somehow I still love your dumb tattoos and all the angst that seeps right out of you. You don't believe in God, but you believe in me.
spiritualize everything. Lord, you want me. If you could have me, and Lord, I want you. If we could hold each other again, 'cause we're stuck in a limbo, and I can't handle one more October alone. Maybe I've just got to let this go. 'Cause if we don't know by now, then we both know.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I really like your voice.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
I still like get nervous when I play to literally a screen in my own apartment, but it's cool. One day I'll learn how to make eye contact with people.
No, that's fine. I was having the same issue where I was kind of like felt nervous about just staring at a screen while you were performing a song. Yeah, I always go back to a line from Seinfeld.
My favorite, yeah.
The episode with Mel Torme, and Jerry goes, "I can't go see a man sing a song."
I dated very briefly this guy who is like an aspiring comedian, and he like very early into hanging out was like, I can't watch people sing. And I think he probably was just stealing that, but I was like, well, I guess we can't date each other. Like, what do you want? Like, I don't think this is gonna work out. You can't see people, like, what if I was like, I can't see people perform stand-up comedy? Like, that'd be such a garbage thing to say, but
I can't see a man perform a joke.
Yeah, but I know, I get it. It's like, it's been a very vulnerable space. You're just like, what do I do? But yeah, thanks for letting me.
Oh no, thank you as well. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I wish you good luck with everything.
Thanks.
Obviously you'll know about the interview and the clips. The clips we're gonna of the songs we'll have, and you can use them as you like too. You can feel free to share them, or feel free to she them, as I was about to say. And by the sound of the clickety clacketing in the background, I guess I do have to go.
Okay,
I have a feeling that somebody's going to explode if I don't.
Yeah, all right, same.
Christiana, thank you very much for taking the time.
Brett.
You have a great rest of your day.
All right, thanks, Brett. Have a good day.
All right, you too. Bye.